Hello, this is Angelica Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Today's conversation is with Kira Pauls. I think at this point, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know who Kira is. Kira and our work overlaps a lot. We're both focused on tarot, and she is a therapist. And I do shamanic work, and sometimes when you're doing that kind of work, shamanic work, and obviously therapy, you're going into the depths of doing some soul work and soul retrieval work and trauma work. It's just part and parcel for holding space and not being afraid of the dark places. So I think Kira and I are very aligned, which is why this is Kira's third time on the show. I think at some point we're just going to have to admit that Kira is the co-host here and just move on from there. But actually, I invited her on for a specific reason, and it's because we've been having this ongoing conversation about ethics and ethics as a tarot reader and energy healer and shadow worker and all of those things. We often will bounce things off of each other and ask for feedback with ethical dilemmas and things like that. So um, when I envisioned Centered and doing a podcast, I really envisioned this. I envisioned conversations that continued where you would really get to know some people that I continually had on. So if you don't know Kira, she's a tarot reader, a social worker, a therapist, and she has training in archetypal analysis from a Jungian perspective. She's a certified shadow retrieval facilitator. Kira is also trained as a yoga teacher and massage therapist. She's a practicing witch and druid. So we actually cover a ton of ground on this episode and bounce around because with ethics, we're talking about lots of different things. So we're covering ethics, holding space, shadow work, getting certifications. How much do you charge? So we're talking a little bit about money, energy, time, soul retrieval. You can find Kira online at awintarot.com. I hope you enjoy this episode with Kira Pauls. There's so many things with ethics, and I think that's why it's a good touchstone for a conversation, is because we have money as one part of ethics, and then how do you treat others, how do you treat your clients, how do you present your qualifications as a healer and a tarot reader, and then the ethics of what you're actually doing, so there's all these different layers of ethics, and maybe that's many episodes. And then when I was taught ethics, I was taught things like transference and the things that psychologists are taught.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of healers that don't have any idea because they weren't trained to hold space on any of those things. So they're constantly having these psychodramas play out in their practice because they haven't been taught how to hold space and talk to people outside of the room with their client about what they're actually feeling and going through.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Maybe we should start doing group supervision for healing practitioners.
Oh my God, that would be so good.
Actually, it would.
That's a great idea.
Because I was just thinking about that. I have to do group supervision towards my license. So it's why couldn't there be that with healers too? Even a lot of people after they have their license, they'll still go for supervision just because it's good to have someone to talk to about your cases.
Yeah, it's so helpful. I call you, I call Sharon. I have a couple people that I go to where I'm like, this thing happened. And I won't say names and addresses and but just talking about this happened and I'm not sure if I handled it well, and
right,
it triggered my own shit, and
yeah,
that's
and
the scariest
we
part.
think to do that because even with you, you have a familiarity with the world and how things should work, but I think a lot of healing practitioners really don't, and they don't even think about the possibility that maybe they should talk to someone who might know or even just a peer.
Well, there's so much damage done. People even flip comments that a healer will make to a client because they get triggered or afraid or something like that can really cause damage for a long time. to people.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know if you've ever had to unweave that if somebody comes in your practice and say, oh, this person told me I had a curse on me, or that it felt
Yeah.
like that person cursed me. And I've been living with that knowledge for 2 years, or some crazy long length of time.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah. Was that you that told me about someone who had their chart read and they were told they were gonna die?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like shit like that. Like what
Yeah.
the
It's yeah. She gave it as a warning. And it is not, it's not responsible to do that.
so irresponsible. Especially because you don't, I mean, come on, like even if you think you see that in a chart or something, like you don't know.
Yeah. I overheard one of my students, she got done with the reading. She said, I saw that person's going to die. And I was like, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
And it was literally her first reading out in public. And that was the first thing she saw. And I just like, we don't do that. We don't do
No.
that. And I really put her in her place. And she didn't talk to me for a few months because I was like, we you have to keep your ego in check. You have to keep that stuff in check.
Good.
It's not about you. And it's just, I don't know. Just, where does that come from? You think it's the old fortune telling kind of background?
I do think so. I mean, I notice that a lot with like new people starting out that they're like, "Oh, I had this vision and I had this happen and I saw this person die." And it's like, "No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't." Like I know
Because
you're
if
lying.
it doesn't happen, then they say, oh, I'm so glad I warned them, and they could divert their path. They say weird.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you gave them paranoia.
Yeah, fear. It's just so, that unethical stuff seems so obvious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I think a lot of people come in to, at least when I'm teaching tarot, they say, what if I see death in the cards? And what if I see this? And I literally that has never happened to me.
Yeah. The only time I will say it did happen to me, and I will not do this again, it was someone who had already died, but we didn't know if they died yet or not.
Mm.
But it was a woman, like a friend of mine, her friend went to Scotland, and for some reason when she was in Scotland, went out wandering late at night. And she just went out wandering into the woods and they couldn't find her. They had police dogs like sniffing for her and everything. And my friend asked me to pull cards on it. And I got the 8 of Cups and Judgment.
Oh, yeah. We did talk about, I was like, this kind of sounds familiar because we talked about this when we were talking about, do you see death with death? And you're like,
Right.
no, I see it with judgment. And I was like, yeah, right.
Judgment. I see it with the 8 of Cups. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was the only time. And I think the only reason why is because I think it had already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or she was probably dying at that time. But it was about a week later that the police had found her. So, I mean, yeah, I really don't, but I've never seen it like in a card like predicted necessarily.
Yeah, I've had it a couple times when someone's asked me specifically.
Yeah.
Like I was doing a reading for someone who was in our community and she was sick and it was like a recurrence kind of sickness, and she was like wanting to do all of the treatments and she was kind of going nuts trying to find the treatment. And she just said, am I gonna die? And I pulled a card and it was very confirming. And I said, you need to not spend the next year, 2 years of your life searching for a cure, because that's not going to happen, so how do you want to live this life now? And I kind of told her, because it's just so hard. It was very obvious that she was going to have to live with this condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was just a really hard reading. And
but see, the way that you handled it though is like, I mean, like how a doctor or a therapist or someone or like a hospice worker or someone would handle it, which is like, okay, it is what it is now. So what are we going to make of it?
Yeah. because you can die from the treatment, and that was kind of the message, was like, she's going to spend the whole time looking for a cure instead of living what short time she has. And when I said that, she actually said that's what the doctor told me.
Wow.
So
wow. Yeah.
it felt validating, but I still didn't like it.
No, it's terrible to have to tell someone that.
I spilled some oil, which is making me want to put oil on. Yeah, I don't, in terms of my students and stuff, they always get afraid of that. They always ask me that question. Do you get that question too?
I do, actually. Like, I have a lot of people ask me, sometimes they'll even be afraid to get a reading with me because they'll be like, well, will you see if I die?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's more, because I've had a lot of people get readings from me that, like, I work with, for example, like, so they're not like woo-woo people. They're like a cop.
Yeah.
And they're like, are you going to see if I die?
You're like, do you want me to? What
do you want? I mean, we could try. If you really want to know.
Yeah. I think I told you about that book I read of these kids that, like, they go to a fortune teller when they're kids, and she tells them all the date of their death. And the whole novel is about them reckoning with that. And it's so interesting, all the different responses.
Oh, that is I'm so glad I haven't seen someone who told me when I'm going to die.
I know.
My my one friend, who she's the one who's the acupuncturist, she was telling me about, she had a friend who went to this astrologer who's in China, who apparently is known as like this really good Chinese astrologer who like can see exactly when people are going to die and is very accurate. But usually doesn't tell people that unless they really beg him, and then he'll do it. But anyway, someone she was friends with, I actually think it was a client of hers, went to go see this astrologer and gave him his own birth date and also the birth date of his adult son. And the astrologer looked at the chart of this man's adult son and said, this man has already died. And the man was like, yeah, he did.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and he knew like the date that he died.
How? That's
I don't know, but like like he had already died. Yeah, like his son had died from, I think it was a heroin overdose, and like this guy even got that too. He was like, he knew it was something about like, he was like struggle, pain, but also like to some degree like recklessness, and like it's like, ooh.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know.
See, that stuff fascinates me, and yet I also think it's highly unethical.
Yeah,
exactly. Looking for that,
Yeah.
That's, I think the problem when people kind of skirt that issue is like, is this what the person actually wants?
Right.
Not, are you trying to scare them to get them to, get connected to you? And that's the unhealthy part, and the ego part, and the truthfully narcissistic part of the power of being a healer or the spiritual leader or a psychic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had in my tarot class, I tell the students, I'm like, there's really nothing off limits for asking the tarot. The only thing that's off limits is, what do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people will say like, well, will it tell me when I'm going to die or anything like that, or about my death? It's like, if you ask it that, it could, but do you want to ask it that? Is more the question.
That's a good point. I mean, I always tell my students, like, help your client craft a question that's actually going to help them.
Yeah, that's actually going to be useful.
Yeah, like it, if they're asking me why is my husband cheating on me, or is my husband cheating on me, I'm like, okay, well, let's go deeper.
Yeah.
And when I started my practice, hey, I would do questions like that all the time.
Oh,
and I hated them, and I felt really uncomfortable with them, but I still did them. But now I kind of shift it and I say, okay, let's really get to the heart of it. Do you have reasons to suspect him, and
Right.
what are you going to do with this information once you get it, and all of that,
Exactly. Yeah.
we
Yeah, because
kind of,
even things like that, like, I mean, even like asking the cards, like, is he cheating on me? It's like, do you want to know?
yeah,
Or should we approach this from a different angle? That's going to be more helpful anyway,
yeah,
other than just asking it, is he cheating on me? And then you get a very obvious yes, and you're like, oh shit.
I know.
Now what?
I mean, sometimes I see that. Like, I once had a reading for a man, and I could see he was cheating. Like, every card was about another person, and it was one of those readings that I taped and then sent to him and never heard back again. So I was like, I'm pretty
Oh,
sure I got that one, but I don't know.
I think you nailed it.
But it's hard, because I have no judgment with that. Like, I don't, when someone's sitting in front of me and they're like, I'm cheating on my husband and this is happening and that's happening, I'm like, okay, so what
Okay.
do you want to do with that? Like, what do you
Right.
want to know? I mean, because sometimes I'm the confessor. That's okay. I don't mind that. I treat my tarot sessions with confidentiality. I mean, I'm not protected
Absolutely.
ethically. Like, if somebody committed murder, I would have to do that. And I consider myself a mandated reporter. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Even though I'm not technically a mandated reporter, but I still treat it that way.
of course. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
generally, I consider our sessions protected and confidential. So if somebody tells me that, I don't think spirit judges that. I feel like that's your journey, and you're going to get to the end, whether you
Absolutely.
are sleeping with the neighbor or whether you're sleeping with your husband.
Well, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it's like that's kind of what I figure with like cheating and affairs is like it's completely understandable. It happens a lot. It's not a good decision. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying I vouch for it, but it happens so much that it's like, I mean, I would have so much judgment about so many people if I were to judge that because it's like that's so common.
It is. It is. It's surprising, actually. You know.
I mean, that's why I'm surprised that there aren't more people trying to be polyamorous. I'm like, I mean, that's not a good reason to be poly. Like, I mean, if you're poly, you definitely should be honest. But if it's just that you like more than a couple people, like, come on, like, there's no reason.
Right. The part that's hard about that is the ethical part of
Right.
non-monogamy. Like, if you're poly under duress, you're making someone poly even though they don't want to be. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the problems I have, like, ethically when I'm reading people is I have a very heteronormative view of things because the tarot is very heteronormative. So I have to really, like, get out of that. So when I'm seeing cards that are coming up, I ask the person, like, do you actually want to get married?
Hmm.
Because not everybody wants to be married. And my assumption that that's a good thing can really lead me down some, like, painful roads for people, or do they even
Yeah.
want to have children?
Right.
Um, so if they get the pregnancy card, if they don't want to be pregnant, that's a horrible card to get.
It's not like, oh, yay. It's like, oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to consciously unravel that because the tarot is so traditional in its views of things. The king and the queen, and the
Yeah.
knight is a male, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Hmm.
interesting. What about money? Like, do you charge different for tarot readings than you do for your sessions? Like, if they're just psychology.
Oh, okay, like therapy? No.
Therapy.
Nah, I don't. Because I figure that, I mean, I had originally thought about charging different, and I will say too, I mean, with my therapy, actually, sometimes I end up charging less
Mm-hmm.
than for tarot, just because I offer the sliding scale to people.
Yeah.
I don't really do a sliding scale as much for tarot because I have the therapy thing that I have the sliding scale for. But really, ultimately, like the hourly rate is the same, like without the sliding scale.
Yeah.
Um, because I figure that my time is my time. It has the value it has, but I don't know. Um, that's how I've always done it.
Yeah. Do you struggle with the money thing?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge struggle. Because even with therapy, especially, it's like on one hand you want to make it accessible to people, but on the other hand, you need to be compensated fairly. And on the other hand, I do think it's important for people to realize that this is an investment. And so it's like, I've had people tell me before, it's like, if your car needs fixed, you don't really spend all this time thinking about like, well, but is that really worth it? And can I really, and you just do it. Your car needs fixed.
Right.
So when it comes to like your mental or even spiritual health, why do we consider it to be something different? Because that is a like, if your brain isn't working well enough to get you through like your work day, for example, clearly something needs to be done. So yeah, I've really grappled with that, because I do want it to be valued, but at the same time I do want to be accessible.
Yeah. I've struggled, like when I don't charge people, it always kills me because they come back like a week later and they'll be like, so I went to see another psychic and they validated. And I'm like, I gave you a free reading because you said you didn't have money.
Yes.
And then they paid somebody
Oh
else.
my,
And it's because they don't value things that are done for
yes.
free. They
I've
don't value
actually,
things done to by friends either, you know?
yes, and I've had that happen too. Even like with my old work, because my old work was, everything was free of charge, and like usually that was fine. But let's say someone ended up wanting a service through there, then that changes things,
Yeah.
and then we're to the free thing. And like you said, it's like, oh wow, awesome! So you paid that other person double what you would have had to pay me for one,
Yeah.
um, and I did it for free.
Well, that's where the energy exchange comes in, you know, that's so important. Like when I learned Reiki, you know, you learn the history of Reiki, and Reiki in Japan was offered for free. Like there
Yes.
was a no charge. But then when Mrs. Takata brought it to the West, she made people pay $10,000 in 1936 or whatever it was to get attuned to Reiki, because she said the only thing people in the West value is money. And if they think it's just like woo woo something, they won't value it. So she charged like an arm and a leg. That's why there was only 21 of the original like people who she attuned, because,
Yeah.
and I love that approach. I mean, it sucks. It's a lot of money, and it's, you know, only the privileged few could do it. But I like that she valued it enough and thought it was important enough to charge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this reminds me that I had a brief interaction with someone not too long ago because I posted something about anti-capitalism
Yeah.
on my Instagram, and someone replied saying like, well, I don't know how you can really say that you're against capitalism when you're over here charging $90 for a tarot reading. And I go to their page and they're charging like $50 for a tarot reading. And I told them, I messaged them back and I said, I'm sorry to hear that you don't value yourself the way that I value what I do. I know that I have a wealth of experience and education that makes this well worth it. Um, and I also need to pay my bills and like feed myself and like take care of my pets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's not like
yeah,
you're creating a corporate machine for tarot.
right,
You're one person. That's
right,
different than being like a capitalist corporate
right. Being like,
exploiter of poor people, you know.
I think it's interesting because with the tarot community, like at least the tarot people in the United States, I've felt like, I mean, there's still issues and stuff, but I have felt like a lot of the tarot readers I've met in the United States have been more like progressive sorts of people. But I have noticed a little bit like with like Australia and the UK, that their tarot readers sometimes can be a little bit different. And I have noticed some like more racist and other ist behaviors, actually from some of the groups overseas.
there's a lot of snottiness in the tarot community with like
Yes.
your lineage and how
Yeah.
you read and how you do it. And, I feel like I'm always unwinding these weird rules that people come to me with.
Right.
Like, you can't lay any more than your 10 cards for the Celtic Cross. And as you know, I use the entire deck nearly.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just like, and that, and that, and that, and that, like, I just don't get it. It's like, what are you
Yeah.
doing there? Are you following rules or are you giving a person a reading?
Right. And how is there a rule? Like,
I know.
when was a rule created? I know even my one friend, Lisa Boswell, she has a divination fortune telling website. She's really cool. But she had talked about this before because she's Romani fortune teller.
Yeah.
It has like generations of that. And she was talking about some of the myths and everything and the weird rules that people have around tarot, because especially like coming from the fortune telling background with like lineage, like there's a lot of that comes up. And I know like one of the things she would talk about a lot is how people believe that your first tarot deck should be gifted to you. It shouldn't
one's
be
a weird.
bought. Yeah. And like, it's funny because with that one, I had thought like that's so ridiculous. But then I did decide recently because like I was like, okay, there is like something maybe a little traditional about it. I decided I started gifting my my teenage clients like their first tarot deck because I was like, I do think like there is something like a little bit magical about like getting it from someone like as your first time.
Yeah.
So I did decide to do that, but really no, you can just go out and buy it. Just
I
go
did
out
that for my,
and buy.
my daughter
Yeah.
got her period. I gave her her first deck on when she got her first period. I had
Yeah.
I had a box and had that, and then I had oil for cramping and like a zine that somebody wrote about their period and a book that was written by Rachel Pollack that's specifically for teens interpreting the tarot. And I just had this whole package. And so,
Oh, Rachel Pollack has a book for teens?
yeah,
Oh, that's awesome. I should look at that. Yeah.
I forget what it's called, but I have it downstairs because it's bees. And I did that for my nephew too. I gave him, I mean, he didn't get his period. I just gave him a deck and the book. So yeah, just I think it's great to do that, especially for teenagers. And
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember discovering tarot? Oh my gosh, that was so cool.
Yeah. Well, and that's like why I had to actually so I have these two teen girls as therapy clients, and they actually know of each other, but not through me. But
That's funny.
they had figured it out. But and the reason they figured out was because of the tarot decks.
Amazing.
But yeah, it is funny because like I really do think it's such an important thing for teens. And for me, I was about their age when I first discovered the tarot. I was 13. And so like for me, just like seeing kids that age experimenting and being fascinated with the tarot is just like, yeah, that just like warms your heart.
I know. It's so great. I know we've gotten off the ethical track.
I know. We were like, let's do this like really like all over the place ethical thing, and then we went really all over the place.
But they all met. That's the thing about ethics is that it does touch everything,
Oh, it does.
And it's so, for me, it's so related to parenting because, I often find that I become like the proxy mom, the proxy shitty teacher that rejected the person. I become all those people. I like learning about transference and learning about that stuff can be
oh god,
so valuable.
Transference, yeah. Like how every male client at some point starts to think that they're in love with you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not.
Handle that when it comes up in your practice.
So yeah, I mean, actually, the "I'm in love with you" sort of thing is actually not too uncommon, especially with men. Um, Usually, men who are kind of single, lonely in their 20s and 30s. A lot of times, it does happen with. And I've had other transference too. Like I would say, I have actually had transference with some like of the younger teens with like kind of very clearly almost kind of like mommy things
Yeah.
going on. I think I'm lucky in that I'm still relatively young, so it's pretty uncommon for someone to pull the mom transference on me unless they're quite young themselves. But yeah, usually what I get is the like anima projection.
Yeah.
I'm just the perfect projection for your anima. And so then it's like, am I in love with you? And it's like, no, um, I usually share with clients if they actually do openly express feelings like that, and a lot of them don't. You can just kind of tell through other things.
Yeah.
But sometimes if they are very open and honest about it, I let them know, like, I really appreciate that you share that with me. And like, that's a really common thing to experience, whether it's therapy or working with a spiritual healer or anything like that, to start feeling like more intense or tender feelings of love and affection. And that makes a lot of sense considering the fact that maybe you're someone who usually isn't able to open up around a lot of people, and now you have been able to open yourself up to someone. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, like I feel vulnerable. Does this mean I'm in love?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just assure them that like it's a really normal thing. I think with transference that you know when it feels appropriate, and if you can, it is good to just talk about it very openly, and talk about like they're definitely, I have noticed this. I think that open communication with clients is always best.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had more, I think, people unconsciously
Yes.
transferring and treating me like their teacher. Like I can always tell when people have mother wounds with the way they teach me, but I'm also very maternal, so I think I kind of bring that out too.
Exactly.
I can tell like if somebody's had a exploitative teacher, they kind of don't. It takes a while for them to trust.
Yes.
And some of the sexual or love stuff. I mean, I sometimes get that from women too. But generally, like I'm not afraid of those conversations.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do have a lot of that feeling of being maternal towards my clients. So I
Yes.
kind of feel that I don't think it's countertransference because I have a place for it, and it's
Right.
not like that gets out of control or something, but it's just I have this unconditional love for my clients that
Absolutely.
is just it transcends that. So when they say that, I can understand. It's kind of like your kid saying too, like I'm going to marry you when I grow up.
Right. Exactly. It's like, oh, honey.
Yeah, where you're like, oh, that's so cute.
I know. It's like there is that little bit of you that's like, oh, like because like you feel safe. Like
Yeah,
that's so good.
yeah,
Because in a way, it can also, I mean, sometimes the transference, in some ways, can almost tell you that you're doing it right.
yeah,
Um, because
yeah.
like it should, if you're a spiritual healer, if you're a therapist, to some extent, like it should
Mhm.
kind of stir things up on a really deep level for people and make them feel things that maybe they haven't felt for a long time, or that they were afraid to feel, or that it was too uncomfortable to feel. Like, to some extent, like, although transference isn't the most fun thing, it can get really sticky. It can also sometimes tell you that, okay, maybe you are like getting to the deeper layers. And then it also can tell you that like, okay, because you are getting to the deeper layers, it's time to like, really check yourself with your own ethics and your responsibility, because clearly you're touching something deep here.
Right, and that's where our ethical center comes so important, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've had friends who actually did sleep with their therapist, you know what I mean? And that caused such psychological damage.
Oh God.
And it's very traumatic. And so I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I think it extends to energy healers. So you have to have really strong boundaries. And
Absolutely.
I've had to like have boundaries just with people saying like, oh, I'm your friend, I'm going to call you and we're going to do this, and then you'll do a tarot reading for me at my house. And then it's like they want to blur all those lines because they don't have boundaries. But that's where my training comes in, where it's like, okay, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to have to hold really strong boundaries here and say no, and tell you like what our relationship is and what happens. I even have to do that as an AA sponsor.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
Where I have to say, I'm actually not your friend, I'm your sponsor, and I love you more than I want to be liked by you, and I'm not trying to like hang out every weekend, I'm trying to get you sober. And it can be really muddy, and because nobody's trained in AA, there's a lot of bad things that happen. So
yeah, AA is one of those things. Well, and even domestic violence work for a long time had kind of had that approach too. Now of course now it's different, but that is one of those really tough things. It's like I have liked that about the spiritual community, because in social work I loved the idea that there could be peer mentorship. Like I think in some ways it's so powerful, but it can also get extremely dangerous, extremely sticky. A lot of boundary issues can come up.
yeah.
And so I think that that's why the spiritual healing community can kind of get like that too, because in a lot of cases it is kind of like peer support, because a lot of times, like I know for me as a tarot reader, it's been very common that like my client would be a massage therapist I know, or a yoga teacher I know. In fact, that's probably more common than anything. So really it is peer support. So then it's like you have all this like mingling, and that I don't generally have in therapy, that like I avoid in therapy, or I can at the very least, if something comes up where there's people knowing each other or something, well, hey, I've got my policies, I've got my rules by law, I can't tell you things, and the law protects me. But with the spiritual healing, there isn't that. And so you're just kind of there in this like mix of like ickiness sometimes, where people are talking to each other, and it can get really sticky.
Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of have some kind of code of ethics for your practice, because it does protect you, in that way. But it is messy. And I made a lot of errors in my early years, only because I moved here as an energy healer and a tarot reader. And I started working at AltaView, and the people I attracted, I mean, my first client was Lance. And
oh, that's funny. He was your first.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, within the first couple months. It's just,
wow.
the coolest people I was the coolest people here were people who were coming to me as clients. So when they would ask me to hang out, I would be like, yes, oh my gosh, thank you,
Of course.
But then it got really messy with some of them, especially people who have deep wounds. Like Lance and I didn't become friends until many years after, that first client session. But it does get kind of messy. And I had to learn sometimes the hard way. And I mean, I should be embarrassed about that, but I'm not, because I think that's part of the problem. It's part of the problem in our community. We don't have ethics. We don't have a governing board. We don't have mentors.
Exactly.
So
exactly. I mean, you're just kind of left out there on their own, on your own to figure it out. Yeah. Like with social work, at least there's like people that are like, well, here's what the law is, you can follow this. But with tarot, there was really no guidance. Maybe we should make a code of ethics.
I know, we should. I would love that. I mean, that's why when I started doing my circles, I made a whole list of ethics that we go through the first class, and they were all like, I'm not tolerating talking about people, and I had all these things. And part of it was like, this is how holding space for other people, this is what it looks like. We don't cross talk. We don't do this, we don't do that. But I had to come in my own head with what that was going to look like for me, with holding space for people, because you do get intimate, you do get vulnerable, and people mistake that for friendship when actually what it is one-sided, because you're hearing their issues and their problems and they're not hearing yours. They're not holding
right
space.
and
Yeah.
I have definitely run into that where I think with those one-sided relationships, because I haven't had those in therapy, but I've had those for sure with tarot and the other spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
And people who know me through there. And it's like, yeah, it's I don't think that the other side always realizes how one-sided it is, because they're getting what they want and need.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that the other isn't. So yeah, that definitely I've run into that many times too.
And that's why money is an important part of the transactional part of it, is that money is energy. And so when someone pays you and then unloads on you, it doesn't feel draining, because you've had an exchange of energy. They've given you money and you hold space, and you're not expecting friendship. You're expecting a business transaction or an energy healing transaction. It's when they don't give you money, they just want to take it out. I've had people try to convince me to see them in my own house so I could charge less. And it's like, so many boundaries are broken there. It's like, I work for a practice where I pay, a certain percentage of every client to the people who own the business, because that's how they make money and that's how I make money. And I'm not going to be unethical and lack integrity in that. That's, to me, it goes counter to everything I do. Even if I see people in my house, I pay the wellness center that I work at, because I don't want any ideas that I'm, muddying all the waters there. I want them to know.
Exactly.
And also, it's not a friendship thing. Like, once they come to your house, then it turns ugly.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I definitely see potential issues with this a lot, with a lot of the spiritual communities I've been involved in, like just a lot of mingling. And I don't think that that's a problem necessarily. Like, I mean, I remember one time I was sitting in a meeting, and it was our multidisciplinary team meeting that we had at my old work, and it was the DA's office and children and youth and all those people. And children and youth, the one supervisor was saying about, she was really like mad or something because she was told that, like, it's explicitly against their policies at children and youth to fraternize with their staff. And so it was like, it was one of those things where it's like, on one hand, I'm like, at an agency like that, because of all the things they deal with, I do think that that's maybe a good role. But there are so many other cases in most other professions and stuff that's not realistic. People absolutely fraternize with each other, and mentors fraternize with mentees. And I don't think that we can just write it off as, oh, that's always unethical or something, because it's just not. It's more complex than that. But then at the same time, it's like, but then we do run into issues where it's like, oh, wow, we're all going to the same, I don't know, hippy dippy festival with skinny white girls dancing around and belly shirts and whatever. And clients are here and and like everyone knows each other. And like, wait a minute, that practitioner is also my client. And wait a minute, that practitioner is that practitioner's client, but also their friend, but also their practitioner. And it's like,
we live in a small community too, where there is a lot of I was gonna say incestual relationships. So it's not really like that, but you know what I mean. It's like a lot of everybody has a history here.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, people have to make their businesses work how they work. Like, I mean, if the people who are going to pay them are the people that they work with, then it is what it is. But yeah, it's also like, how do we then within that have an ethical standard?
Yeah. And I mean, navigating that is just taken for me. I like kind of, it's like an energetic thing, and I hate to be so woo woo about it, but it truly is like,
It is.
I feel it, I feel the energy. Do we have clear boundaries? My friends, the people that I consider friends who have also stayed clients, who have also stayed colleagues, and, they've kind of transcended all those things. One of the things that happens is we pay each other for the work that we get from each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, when I hire Lance to do graphic design work, I pay him. And when he
Right.
comes to a journey at AltaView that I'm doing, he pays for that,
Right.
And we've even talked like, oh, do you want to exchange? And I said, let's just not muddy the waters. And he's like, I agree. I just want to make sure we're always clear on who's getting paid. I don't want that resentment to be part of the relationship, So
Absolutely.
I love talking about the money thing because I've heard a lot of people in our community who don't charge. And then I've heard, like we were kind of talking about people charging a lot of money for different things. And sometimes that I find it so brazen, like the people who charge a lot, I'm like, you don't even have a degree in that, like you just invented that title or you just invented that thing. But I don't know. I think it's my own
You just invented
money. It's my own hang with money too. And something that I've noticed, like when I get triggered in that way, it's um, because I put so much value on my certifications and being taught by
Yeah.
teachers. Like I took a class that was about like utilizing drum with Reiki, and
Mm-hmm.
I took it, and it was, it was an expensive class for me. Like at the time, I didn't kind of pay that much for classes. And it literally taught me almost nothing about, I mean, it was exactly what I was doing. And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like, okay, now I can use the drum in session. It was really ridiculous. I feel like I paid whatever it was, $200-300 just to like get permission to use a drum.
Oh my gosh. That's like literally like me. I completely feel you. I'm like, I have to get
You
the
can't drum on
certification.
someone. And literally this woman channeled this information. So she developed her own modality. She got her own symbols. She got her own stuff, but she had no book. She had nothing, she just started using a drum. And my shamanic teacher was like, they've been doing that for thousands of years, right? Because I told her the whole story. Like, we just clap over people when we don't have a drum. Like she was really funny about it. She's like, you don't have to get a certification to clap over somebody. So
I mean, it's funny though, because it's like, I mean, I do think that those of us who take what we do very seriously, like we want to take it seriously.
yeah.
So it's like even down to getting a certification and doing a drum, like, yeah, I want it to be legit. I take it very seriously. Of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like it makes sense but it is funny too, because it's like, I've thought about that with certain things where it's like, oh, okay, so like I'm gonna go get certified in this thing to prove myself. But this person never got certified in it because they created it.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, I've also been on the other end where I've taken, like, I took a drum to a Reiki share.
Uh-huh.
And this woman said, wait, you're going to drum over somebody? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to just drum and break up the energy there. And she was like, it had never in my life occurred to me to use a rattle or a drum during a session. And she was like, it's like the whole world has opened up, and there was like a beam of light going like a drum. It was
Aw.
very cute, but you know, it's true. Like we get caught in our ruts, and you know, it is
Yeah.
nice to be inspired by other people. But then there's another line, which we kind of talked about the other day, where it's like, I've had clients come in, have one crystal healing session, and then hang a shingle and be like, "Oh, I'm a crystal healer now." And I spent so long training to be a crystal healer
Right.
because some people have reactions to crystals. There's ways to use crystals that work, some that don't. And yet it is a very intuitive process, and you could just do that. So I don't know. I'm in two minds about it, because on one hand, I'd love to empower people to just play. And on the other hand, I've worked really hard for my certifications, and
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, I definitely feel that way, like with therapy, where it's like, you know, I do actually believe that like a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds are able to be good counselors. I mean, like the example I give that I've had more recently is that like I had a situation where I went to multiple different social work supervisors, therapists, who in order to help with a professional situation, but also a kind of a professional crisis situation where I needed some, you know, sensitivity and support as well, who really had no ability to hold space for me in any way, really were terrible at listening. And then I ended up speaking to an attorney who did hold space, who did listen, who was validating, who was supportive, who was nurturing. And so like I definitely am of the mindset that like, yeah, in a lot of ways, like when it comes to being a good space holder or therapist or counselor, um, you know, it's more about the person. And yet at the same time, I also feel very strongly that like I worked really hard to get the degrees and license and everything that I have. And there is an ethical code to my license. And so then, you know, if people do think like, oh, well, I'll just start up, it's not really therapy, but it's kind of therapy, basically. I'm like doing that same sort of thing. They just set it up because they think they can. Um, yeah, I really have a tough time with that because then I do see people, you know, not following the standards that like a therapist would have to follow.
yeah.
Um, and that's when it gets really concerning, because it's like there is a reason. Yes, some of the rules in the therapy world there's a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of, you know, I think reinforcement of unhealthy power differentials. I think there's a lot of that in the therapy world. And yet at the same time, there is a lot of stuff in there that was put in there to protect clients.
Yes.
And that is very important.
There's a lot of that in the spiritual healing community, gatekeeping, and you know.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I don't know.
And even the power differential thing. Yeah, you're right, honestly, because I think about it as like the law establishing a power differential, but you're right, even without the law, and like in the spiritual community where there are no laws, like there's power differentials out the ass.
Yeah.
And hierarchies, unhealthy hierarchies.
I just, you know, one of the things I struggle with though, and like just kind of affirming for you, like you were trained. And one of the things I struggle with is when I hear people coming to me saying, I'm doing shadow work with XYZ, or I'm doing, you know, soul retrieval with XYZ. And I'm thinking like, are they trained? Are they trauma informed? Do they know what they're doing? Were they, you know, what is their approach to that? Because I mean, shadow work particularly has become a buzzword. When I started talking about it and started getting trained to do some of that work, nobody was talking about it. In fact, I remember posting about it, and like 2 hours later, a healer in my community posted something like, if you're talking about the shadow, you have a problem. Stay in the light. And if anybody tells you to look at shadow, they're wrong. So, you know.
And that was what, like 5 years ago that people were saying that shit, and now all of a sudden everyone's a fucking shadow worker.
I know but I don't think they understand what that means. Like, I've seen it on TikTok.
No, they
I've seen
don't.
it on Instagram, people talking about shadow work, and they're talking about it like it's just looking at the parts you don't want to look at. It's like, no, it actually is pretty deep trauma work. And it's
Right. Actually,
also,
when I do
oh, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's like when I do shadow work, it's a very deep meditation where we go into the subconscious and actually like examine, like a soul retrieval. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's essentially the same thing.
Mhm.
But it's like that's very deep work in the psyche. Like, it's not just, oh, let's talk for a little bit about some of our problems that we don't want to look at. And a lot of times too, even the interpretation that's out there, the popular interpretation of the shadow is really off base too, because it's not just what we don't want to look at, or it's not what I don't like. I mean, it's like it's not just like the ugly part of me. It's also like, I mean, with shadow work, there's the potential that people can have some really deep, scary traumas that they don't
Yes.
even remember come up. And so, are you now trauma informed? Do you know what to do with this information? Do you know how to help this person? Hell, do you even know how to make a fucking mandated report if that's what's needed?
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of issues that can come up. Because like you said, yeah, it's not just talking about, you know, oh, the things I don't like so much. It's deep psychological work if you're doing real shadow work.
It doesn't even usually come up as like, there's this part of me that I've never really talked about. It usually is a complete triggering PTSD kind of situation that brings up the shadow. And
Yes.
you're usually the trigger of it. You're
Yes.
hearing about it. You're seeing basically you're seeing a 7-year-old in a 35-year-old body throwing a tantrum.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know how to handle that because, I've been working on people and they'll start screaming. Like, are you comfortable dealing with someone who starts screaming on your
Right.
table? I don't
Right.
think there's a ton of people who are comfortable with that, but I also think like, energy workers and even shamanic workers, we have to stay in our lane. Like I can help with the energetic part, but you need a therapist too to talk about this stuff and process it. And, I can hold space for some of that, but I'm not trained to do that deep like PTSD work either. I can do it from a shamanic point of view. I can do it from an energetic. I can be a support in terms of the energy. But, most of the time we don't even have to know about the trauma that we're uncovering. That's for you to discover in therapy with another person, So it's just, it's hard to stay in your lane when we're also have that power differential that we're taught, you're the healer, they're the patient, they're the client. So there's this power differential and we want to be right all the time. We want to be the one who can sit and have all the conversations, and can be hard to refer someone out to someone who's better to deal with it, So most of the time when I do soul retrievals, it's because someone's done all of their shadow work and trauma work before they even come to me. This is the last piece of that work. It's not the first piece of the work,
Yes. Yeah.
They have to have a safe home for their soul to retrieve, come back to.
Right, exactly.
When you welcome a soul home, they have to know that it's never going to be the way it was when the trauma happened. And if you're still reacting out of shadow, that's not a safe place for that soul loss, that soul piece to fragment to come back to. So it is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's like, I mean, okay, yeah, you're inviting that fragmented piece back. Is it actually safe for it to come back? Yeah, it's like, yeah, we want to be whole, but there's a reason we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that reason? And is it something that is now gone? Is the threat gone? If so, then yeah, we can start retrieving, but there was a reason.
Yeah.
There was a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really challenging subject because, like, I do think that, like, like you, for example, and even some other practitioners I know who do like energy work or shamanic work, I would feel very comfortable sending clients to who have, even significant traumas. And yet, I can't exactly, like, I wish I could put it in black and white terms why. Like, I wish I could say, like, here's your checklist to be able to tell if the person you're working with is a safe person or an ethical person. Because that's what they try to do with, like, licensure. They try to say, like, look, this person met all the check marks, like, they're allowed to do this. But we know that that's not necessarily true, because you have had clients who have had sex with their therapist. So we know we know that that is not a guarantee. And then within healing communities where there isn't licensure, it's like, there still isn't like, oh, this certification or this certification, like there isn't anything. So yeah, I mean, it's a really tough thing to gauge, and I don't think we have like an exact answer to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like knowing what you're good at. Like part of my training, my teacher took us through, Pixie Lighthorse took us through, was like, what are you exceedingly good at? What don't you do? And like we had to do, an entire day of figuring out who we are and what we do. And we had to write that out and be very clear. And then we had to take vows on what we do and what we don't do. And
oh wow, yeah.
I mean, I did like a little bit of that in my circle, and some people really hated that idea that we were like looking at what we're doing. But the truth is, like, for me, that's important. It's important for whoever's in my circle to know, like, this is what you're good at. This is what you don't do. You're not a therapist. You're a tarot reader. And yes, it overlaps. We do a lot of therapeutic like things, but we don't do therapy.
Right.
Because I'm talking for the majority of the time. That's not therapy. That's a lecture.
Yeah.
I know people feel shifted after sessions. It's just different. You can't say, and some people do want to say like, oh, what you do is therapy for me. And I'm like, it isn't though. It isn't. And
it's therapeutic.
I like I like that. It's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. And once you understand that, then okay, this has a role and this has a role. And they're not exactly the same. They do different things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a really good way to put it too. It's not that it's like, oh, do you have enough to do whatever it might be, as much as there's different roles. Like, it's just like dietitians and physicians. Like, a dietitian is not a physician. They cannot do the same things that a physician can do, but they have a special skill set that a physician does not have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely, it's looking at it as like, where do I fit into the puzzle, rather than like, how do I model myself as something that I might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important to know that. Because I mean, I wonder, you were saying like what makes someone who you would send people to versus someone who you wouldn't. Do you think it's like an ego thing or humility thing?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing too is that, I mean, because like with my therapy clients, I mean, we are talking people who have trauma.
Yeah.
We are talking people who have trauma with therapy. So it's like, it's also a special population, I feel, because, anyone who's especially working through their trauma right now, actively working through their trauma is very, energetically sensitive,
Yes.
very like just more sensitive in general in many ways. They really need practitioners who are down to earth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the biggest thing. If I just get this sense that like the person is down to earth, I feel like, okay, this is someone I can feel safe sending someone to, because if it comes up that this practitioner maybe doesn't know something or something's out of their scope, they're down to earth enough and they have enough sense about themselves to be able to say like, that's not what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me send you to someone else.
Yeah. And I think, a better a better maybe equivalency is life coaching and therapy and tarot instead of therapy and tarot, because
Yeah.
one of the things that's great about tarot is that I do use my sense of having been in therapy for many decades. I use everything I was taught as a shamanic healer and just my trauma informed approach to things, but I'm using my subconscious too. Like, I'm letting the cards pull out things I wouldn't think to ask and then asking questions around it, so that to me it's different than therapy. You're really listening to the other person and feeding back and helping them process their thoughts. And life coaching, you're telling them, like, here are some ideas for how to get your life on track, and that's when people see tarot readers, generally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and tarot is like great for that. I mean, I use tarot for like goal planning and stuff like
Oh yeah,
all the time because it's so helpful.
yeah, me too. Well, thanks for talking.
Yeah, we're gonna continue this.
I know.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.